There you go. You were hearing "Oh Natural." Now I'm amplified. All right, let me see if I can just put this down over here for a quick second. Thank you all very much for being here. This is a really fantastic session, and I couldn't be happier to be introducing our speakers. One of the key things about the Cannabis-Aid conference that we get to benefit from is people's experience. You know, there's a lot of folks that talk about a lot of things, and there's a lot of folks that purport to offer a lot of things, and it's understandable in a growing industry. It is rarer still to be able to learn from someone who has been deeply embedded in this for a very long time. You call it applied knowledge or experiential learning. And so the folks on stage today have a working relationship together in that. Michael Mays, our primary session speaker this morning, in his consulting industry has 50 plus consultants working on projects around this world. Quantum 9 is a highly regarded and highly recognized firm that's won some awards from the most prestigious organizations in the cannabis industry, him personally, his company. And so I would venture to believe that the things that he will talk about today are born from experience, meaning he's made mistakes. And we're going to try to have you avoid those mistakes. Now, on stage with him is an actual client of his. So he won't be just talking about the clients he works with, but you'll be hearing from a client of his. And that's really critical because now you have an opportunity to see how does he do as a consultant for his partners, right? Because we've got one on him. Got one with him on stage here. And so, again, today our sessions have been just compressed. Our time has been compressed just a little bit. For those of you who might be in the VIP luncheon, that will be served after this, so please don't fret. Your sandwiches will be waiting for you when you get there, I promise. And additionally, for our speaker today, Michael, as a member of the Cannabinoid Research Society, he's contributed to local magazines and publications, to national magazines and publications. He's contributed to international magazines and publications. He's been in video, on TV on it. So he's really sort of carved out a nice opportunity for himself to be seen as a leader in the industry, and we're delighted to have him. So please, if you would, join me in welcoming to our stage today, Mr. Michael Mays.
Hello, thank you, everybody. Welcome to the session, Building a Winning Team and Winning Big. A little bit about Quantum 9. He gave a great introduction. We have 53 consultants that actually work for the firm. We specialize primarily in permit acquisition and licensing. We've worked in over 10 countries, and we have one of the highest success rates in acquiring permits in the world. We've done 24, we've been successful with 22 of them with a 91.6 success rate, and most recently we took the highest grower processor score in Pennsylvania 2 times in a row. I am Michael Mays. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Quantum 9. I've been in government grant writing for 3 years, and after that I've been doing cannabis licensing work for the last 6. As a firm, we won the Silver Golden Bridge Award for the most influential people in business, and we also won the Bronze Stevie Award for Entrepreneur of the Year. So my session is going to talk a little bit about winning big and building a winning team. So it'll span across licensing, cultivation, processing, and provisioning. The first person, and I believe the most important person, is your project leader, the person that's ultimately responsible for the project. His overview and what he's responsible for will be mainly, in the beginning, investments and knowing the right risk. Communicating risks to potential investors and helping them understand is paramount. They're also responsible for all of the licensing work, successful build out of the operation, and then running a profitable business. Next person is your real estate agent. In Michigan, it's probably the most important person besides the project leader. And finding the right real estate at a good price very early in the process is going to be very important for you. They're going to be negotiating your terms with your real estate attorney. Mostly out clauses, maybe changes in the law that will result in having to move. So having the right out clauses within your contracts are very important. We always suggest having a set rent increase over time. We typically do 2 5-year ARMs with a set rate increase over time. What you don't want to do is negotiate your rent every year, which we tell people to try to avoid. And then favorable buying terms at the end of the 10-year term, maybe an option to buy. We've had the most success with real estate agents that specialize in particular markets. So someone that lives in Grand Rapids versus someone that lives in Detroit, getting a real estate agent that specializes in that market is preferred. Next person is your lawyers and your attorneys. Like the real estate agent, we like to go task specific. So in the beginning, it's going to be your business attorneys, the ones that can do the company formation, that can act as your registered agent, and then draft your operating agreements or bylaws. Also getting a certificate of good standing, all of which will be used in your step 1 submission here in Michigan. And one size does not fit all. We suggest having multiple disciplines of different attorneys, such as employment, real estate, cannabis specific, or even tax, to help you with your tax strategy. The next is your certified public accountant, someone that understands 280E. From a tax perspective, this could affect you as an individual directly. So the corporate structure is going to be very important. Mostly they start out as LLCs, but if you're in a provisioning center as an owner, you might want to flip over to an S Corp once the company becomes profitable. But it all depends on your specific situation. And having a CPA that understands 280E for the provisioning side, and the lack of the cost of goods sold being a write-off. Also in the licensing work span, the CPA will be responsible for a CPA attestation that needs to be notarized. They need to audit all of your financials. And once you get into the advanced stages of your step 1 review, they may ask for a $1,000 transaction history. So documenting all the money that goes in and out and all $1,000 transactions with comments and notes may be required. You're going to have to disclose all 3 years of your bank statements, W-2s, and 1099s, specifically for all supplemental applicants and their spouses. The next person is the lobbyist. So I have mixed feelings with lobbyists, but a lobbyist is someone that's hired by a business or a cause to persuade legislators to support that business or cause. It's hard to tell whether a lobbyist is actually doing their job or if they're having influence because most of their meetings are behind doors. One way to tell if they are doing their job is by the amount of meetings that you get with legislators or board members or even people at the local level. In our experience, municipality specific, lobbyists are key. Someone that was like a former senator or a member of the House or even a former governor we've had varied success with. But anybody that has incredible influence is going to be a good advocate for you. Next are your investors. Somebody with deep pockets, someone that understands this industry's ideal, but their ideal traits would be, number one, they have to be super duper rich. Somebody that has enough money that can parse with some of it without feeling like it's their entire life savings. Somebody that's risk tolerant, someone that's a passive investor. We've found that investors that are investing their life savings, they take a lot of your time. There's a lot of coaching that has to happen. And if things go wrong, it could be very volatile in having their involvement. At the provisioning center level or even at the cultivation level, a medical director may be required depending on the municipality that you are submitting in. Ideally someone that is a medical professional, someone that can discuss treatment options with patients, cannabis delivery methods, types of cannabis, and specifically adverse events or adverse reactions. somebody that understands that can review their current medications. We've had specific issues with schizophrenic patients or multiple personalities disorders. Cannabis could exacerbate those problems. So having somebody that can really communicate and counsel somebody that comes through the door is pretty important. The next is your cultivation leads. We usually use a mixed bag of cultivation leads. Someone from the industry, a good metric is their number of flowering lights that they've been responsible for. Awards is a big one, although there's speculation that most awards are rigged and such, but it shows that the cultivator is looking for excellence. So somebody that is even submitting, even in a rigged session or award ceremony, it still shows progress. Somebody that has an idea of their nutrient management systems, and then you could get into phase-specific cultivators as well. For instance, a clone manager or a veg and mother manager, and then a flowering manager. So having a great cultivator in each of those disciplines, depending on how large the facility is good also. And then what they have experience in, the media or the medium, in their cultivation technique, it has to match up with, what your goals are and such. We also borrow from commercial agriculture, someone that has a record of managing people. In the industry folks, depending on their level of experience, a big lack that we find is their ability to manage multiple people and also, cultivating as well. Things that we borrow from the commercial ag space would be like integrated pest management systems and also greenhouse management. It's a good way to piggyback that. Next is your extraction lead. You focus on someone with a scientific background in extraction and testing. A good metric for that understanding is their number of hours on a particular device. Someone that has management experience and someone that has product creation specific experience. So when you're looking for an extraction lead, it's not just the ability to do the extractions, but also the types of products that you're going to create, such as an edible product or vape pens. Someone that has specific experience with that would be preferred. And the types of equipment that they're using, from hydrocarbon extractions to CO2 extractions, the finishing equipment, and then we always suggest somebody that has the testing side of everything as well. Being able to run HPLC machines and mass spectrometers to understand the products and what they're testing at before they're sent to the lab. The next is your retail lead. I think that the most important thing is their knowledge of cannabis and their ability to communicate that to the patients and the employees. We find that pricing strategies is also an incredible trait for them to have. For instance, knowing when to discount, understanding the sales velocity, and really moving the product in a way that doesn't degrade. Also, someone that's very personable, someone that that people like to see and managers like to work with. But on the other side, somebody that's stern enough to crack the whip. Next type of person is your marketing lead, spanning from graphic designers that can do all of your corporate identity, your packaging design, and then on your website, we always suggest WordPress. It's easiest to design and manage. And then someone that can run MailChimp or some type of newsletter delivery. A photographer that can do your online menu system. And then, if they have specific experience with cannabis tools such as Baker, Leafly, Weed Maps, or even a point of sale system. Now on the marketing side, this can be, one person that manages it and they use a bunch of Fiverr people or Upwork or, an independent consultant from another state or country. But those are the main tasks that individual would be responsible for. The next is your application writer. An amazing grant writer is the biggest trait there. A record of success, project lead, like I mentioned in the beginning, that has a team of consultants that work with them in multiple disciplines, from cultivation, extraction, and really down to the licensing end of things as well. Someone that's actually run operations is preferred. So what are big wins? And if you look at the trends and what's been happening in the last few years, this is what big wins look like. Aurora bought CandyMed for $852 million in January of this year. Afria bought Navarra for $670 million. MedMen just bought PharmaCann for $682 million. Canopy bought Metrum for $283. And then Afria bought Broken Coast recently for $185. So the goal is to build wealth within the company so that they can be an acquisition target. And most of the time, when I was writing business plans a few years ago, I assumed that big pharma was going to be your exit strategy. The trends, though, now seem to be that you're more than likely going to be cannibalized by big cannabis. So if your goal is to exit at some time, making those relationships with these larger companies now, and then understanding what they're looking for out of operators is going to be paramount. To talk a little bit more about how to pick the best consultant, we have Sterling Crockett from AgriMed here to talk a little bit about that. Let me just put you down.
Okay. Thanks, Michael. Can everyone hear me okay? Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Sterling Crockett, and I'm one of the founders, the current chairman and the former CEO of AgriMed. Prior to AgriMed, I actually started in the industry with GTI. I was the general manager of GTI Maryland, and before my time in cannabis, I was an entrepreneur for about 30 years and spent most of that time in the construction and defense contracting space. But the catalyst, the thing that brought me to cannabis was actually my daughter Nicole was diagnosed with kidney cancer. And she used a cannabis tincture during her 16 weeks of chemotherapy, worked wonders for her. I was amazed at how well the treatment worked, and it also excited the entrepreneur in me. At that time, didn't feel like I had enough cannabis-specific experience, and so I joined GTI as their general manager. Was with them through the licensing process there, and beyond that process, felt that I had the knowledge, met a few other team members, and we formed AgriMed to apply in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania, in the first round of licensing, awarded 12 licenses. We were fortunate to be one of the initial licensees. They've since awarded an additional 13, and so there's 25 licensed grower processors in the state. Our site was approved for a 100,000 square foot growing facility, and currently our first phase project is 16,000 square feet with a 2,200 square foot laboratory. Now, when we decided to pursue this license in Pennsylvania, we were short on time and had a vigorous debate internally about hiring a consultant. And I have to admit, I was one of the naysayers. In some of my past life, had not had great results with consultants, but we found Michael to be, a bit different. When we met with him as a senior member of his team, he was involved with the project from day one. In fact, one of the first phases of our project was Michael served as a mentor to me, who was the CEO at the time, and the chairman. And that experience was invaluable because going through this process, I mean, there's so many moving pieces. Michael touched on a lot of them. It's kind of like drinking out of a fire hose. So having someone that you can really, lean on, someone with an open mind and heart who has listened to what you're trying to achieve as a company, and also someone strong enough to tell you, say, hey, listen, that sounds good, but in our experience, this is the path that you should follow. After being convinced to go down this road, one of Michael's first recommendations was that, well, Sterling, you really shouldn't be the CEO. This other guy should be. And initially, I was kind of bruised by it, but when I slept on it overnight, I realized that he was absolutely right. So the point being that when you build your team, you'll spend a lot of time talking to yourself, and so it's important to have those people on your team that can see the blind spots. And Michael worked wonders for us, and I don't think you can argue with the results.
And we'll open it up for Q&A now. If you want to sit down, sir.
Okay.
So anybody that has any questions, we can take a few questions.
Wow, we were that thorough.
Yeah, very good. Oh, one in the back. Yeah, so what Quantum 9 does is we work on the licensing side of things. So, building your team, helping you determine whether a building is sufficient or not, and then the application writing work. Every municipality is going to be a little different, and every state's going to be a little different. In Michigan specifically, there are 3 steps to the process. There's the local permit, there's the step 1 of the state permit, and then the step 2 permit. So having someone that can navigate you through all of those processes and building the right team, we feel is where we specialize. So in other words, yes, we'd be responsible for the licensing work.
What is the most difficult spot in the process of it? Because I'm in the process now. I'm trying to, here in Michigan, in order for you to get the license, you got to have a building, like a restaurant,
Mm-hmm.
to place it where you're going to do the business at. So from you, I guess, what's the hardest part or whatnot in the process, or like the most time consuming?
Yeah, I think the real estate piece is huge. Getting a place in the beginning that's ideal may require that you take that rent on very early in the process. In this industry, the traditional mortgages aren't available to us because we practice in an industry that dispenses Schedule I narcotics for the provisioning center. So it's very difficult to do that. So not only is the real estate the biggest a big piece, I would say something equally even more important is the investments. You're required a lot less to build out a dispensary, but still with the equipment, all of the security, the initial employees, and then also making it look nice, and then inventory. So all of that requires a tremendous amount of capital, including the capital that's required by the state to have as liquid capital assets. So I think that if I would have had to weigh them, I would say that the investment is the most important, because without the money, you're sunk. I know people that have the perfect building now that they own, but they don't have enough capital or real estate holdings to meet the capitalization requirements. So, that would be your first hurdle. The second would be the actual real estate, and then a close third would be the writing that'd be required for the actual permit. So your answers to the city or state's questions, and also thorough standard operating procedures and security protocols.
Right. I would agree with all of that, and I would add that when it comes to the real estate, do the work in the community and make sure that they're welcoming of your efforts. I've seen recently a couple of groups that have put in a lot of work and received a license, and then realized that, I'm going to have to find a new location right out the gate because the community is not welcoming of them.
And this industry is quite cutthroat too.
Right.
One of our losses of the 24 was in Massachusetts, and we had the perfect building. I mean, this thing was amazing. It was 50,000 square feet. It had incredible power. It already had a security fence around it. Like, this thing was set up perfectly. It was a heavy manufacturing plant beforehand. And we locked it up with a $20,000 option to buy once the license was awarded. So we thought we were pretty safe there, especially with that amount of money. 2 weeks before the license hit, when it was due, the building was then bought by somebody else, and the landlord was told that any lawsuit that arises from this, they would pay all legal fees. So not only did they come in and swoop in the building and took it over, but they also would cover any fees that came of that. So, you know, your relationship with that landlord is huge, and you know, sometimes when you think you got something locked up, you know, it can change last minute. So even down to the very end.
So, I mean, real estate, I'm living in Seattle right now, but real estate here is relatively less expensive than where I'm at right now or whatnot. So would it be a better, I guess, in a case-by-case basis to actually buy it or rent it?
I think it depends on the municipality, and it depends on your relationship with that particular landlord. So whether it's like a big corporation that owns it and they have many holdings, or if it's just one guy that has, you know, a few stores in that municipality, it is definitely cheaper, and even cheaper than Chicago. But Michigan, you know, you could get pretty nice buildings for cheap. The problem is that the closer and closer you get to the deadline, the higher and higher prices go. So we've seen buildings that, like in Kalamazoo, for instance, there was a lottery system. So, you know, you submit your license, and whether you win or not, you know, that it's all done by chance. So you may have put a down payment on something, or even acquired a piece of real estate, and then you're sitting on it. And if you paid an inflated price, then it's gonna be very difficult for you to move that piece of real estate. So let's say you bought it for twice or 3 times its worth, then, you know, you don't have that liquid collateral in there just because it's not worth that much, and then flipping it's gonna be very difficult. So you're pretty much stuck with it.
I'd also advise to, you know, when you're working through the application process, you know, have your real estate buttoned up just as tightly as you can, because the moment you win that license, that landowner or landlord is going to be thinking, oh, my property just increased in value, and you'd probably be looking at some type of renegotiation.
And you can move real estate too. It's just very difficult, and it's timely. There's a question right there. Yeah, it's difficult in different ways. In most states, there's usually one big licensing round, and there's a limited number of licenses. Like, for instance, in Pennsylvania, first round, there's only 12 grower processor licenses. In New York, there's only 5 to begin with. Those licenses are incredibly coveted and very difficult to acquire. In Michigan, it's a little different, because there's these 3, you know, different licensing rounds, you know, at the step 1, the local license, and then the step 2. And, you know, it's kind of set up like its own country almost, where each municipality will become legal at different times. Like, for instance, Grand Rapids hasn't had their licensing round yet, but Kalamazoo has, and they'll maybe have another one, where, you know, in other cities, they have completely different rules. There may be a smaller number of licenses. For instance, in Lansing, there was only 20. So it's really hard to know what the best markets to go into, but in our experience, it's the ones with the highest population, you know. Transportation is a good route. You know, there's not a lot of transporters that are out. The one thing that we would stress would be, you know, take a good look at what the insurance coverages look like, you know, for armed transport with, you know, high value assets moving from point A to point B. Yeah, exactly. Like anything licensing in from laboratories, safety compliance facilities, all the way through provisioning centers, cultivation, and processing. So we've done a little bit of it all. Any more questions? Okay, I think we're good.
All right. Thanks, everyone.